moving on to now we are going to dive straight into the application questions. So that's the questions that form part of the application. A very basic question, the very first question talking about if you have received any honors degree, then when have you received it? That is one. And then also talk about the membership in any scholastic honor society. So by this question, are they talking about the positions of responsibility that one has held? Or is it a very degree-centric question? How to sort of approach this question?
Previous degrees held, that's where you talk about your academic history. Sorry, repeat your question. Let me see if I get it correct.
It essentially says that if you have received any of your university or any of your university degrees with honors or any other distinction, and if that is the case, then when did you receive it? And also state, are you like member of any of the scholastic honor societies?
That is a question that most schools ask. That is a question that most schools ask, and that is one of the traps in an application, at least from my experience, because people list a lot of things in their CVs, right? And this is the kind of information that should ordinarily appear in your CV.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so if you state it in the application and there's an inconsistency between what you stated in the application and what you stated in your CV, that is where you start having problems, right? So I always advise that, yes, they want to, of course, every school you're applying to, it's not just about Harvard now, every school you're applying to wants to know how you performed in your previous academic endeavors. How well did you finish, right? It's something you need to tell them. They'd see that information in your CV, they'd see that information in your transcript, right? But just because the application does it, the application process is automated to some extent, that helps them in ranking students for the purpose of the academic weighting, because I assume that the application process would have, if it's over 100 possible marks, right? Maybe academics would have 30 degrees, right? Maybe membership of those kinds of societies would have 10, would have 30%, maybe membership of those kinds would have 10% and all of that. So for the purpose of that kind of weighting and ranking of applications, they need to see that. So if you finish top of your class, for instance, or in the top 1% or whatever it is, you need to state it there clearly. And you need to make sure that whatever you're stating there is consistent with what you stated in your CV, right? You need to make sure at every turn that whatever you stated anywhere in the application is consistent with what you stated in your CV. Membership of societies, yeah. I remember I listed membership of societies even down to society I was a member of in my church, because I felt it was international enough, right? I felt it was international enough. I felt it told a good story, right? I felt it was good evidence of my volunteering experience, right? And I listed that. So as best as possible, please put your best foot forward again in the application. Those things you did in school that earned you awards, those things that earned you commendations, and put them there. Those societies you belong to, professional, could be professional, it could be social, it could be religious, as long as the outlook is one that benefits society, put it there.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Kenneth. Now the next question is, so in the application form itself, it will say that you may list down your most recent, you may list down your employment, and you may list down at least only three of your employments. So how do you tackle this question? Because like we just discussed, even in the first question, the employment will very categorically and explicitly be mentioned in the CV. Then how do we differentiate this particular section? Let's say, for example, if somebody has 7 internship experience, does that mean that he mentions 4 in the CV and 3 in this application? Or how to sort of differentiate it, if at all it's required?
When you're filling that out, if the application says, for instance, even in the list of awards, right, they'd say not more than 10, for instance, just pick the 10 most recent, right? Pick the 10 most recent and make sure they are consistent. For employment, also pick the most recent. So if it says you can't list more than 3 previous employments, list the 3 most recent, and then the others after that can appear in your CV, right? The important thing is, for those you stated on the CV and those that are contained in the body of the application itself, they should be consistent, right? And anybody who reads the application and says that, okay, from, let's use internships, from January 2020 to August 2020, you were at Clifford. From September 2019 to December 2019, you were at Hogan Lovells. From January 2019 to June 2019, you were at Slaughter and May, Parry Officer Slaughter and May, and all of that, right? You list all of those out as your most recent experience. And anything after that, right? Because you probably would have had other internship experience through your undergraduate studies and all of that. Anything after that can appear in your CV, right? But make sure that what you have on the application portal are the most recent.
Great. Yeah. That is certainly helpful. Thank you so much. Now, the next question, Kenneth, happens to be, so there is a section which talks about what are your career goals, wherein you have to bifurcate your career goals into 3 parts, 1 to 3 years, then 4 to 5 years, and then 5 to 7 years. And after that, it says that why are you really, how, and then you sort of also select your academic interest and say that how do these academic interests pertain to your career goals? How do you connect these 2 answers, and how do you frame an answer? How do you frame a subjective essay for this particular question?
Now, for me, right, this part of the application, I treat this part of the application in a way as being more important than the personal essay, right? Personal statement, sorry. Personal statement is extremely important, right? But this part is, first of all, it's 1,500 characters. That means it's a sizable piece of writing, right? So it qualifies as a personal statement in and of itself. It qualifies as a personal statement in and of. There are schools where their personal statements are limited to 1,500 characters, right? So this qualifies as a personal statement in and of itself. So I've found that people, at least a few people I've spoken to who have applied in the time after I left Harvard, they forget that there is also another piece of writing that needs to be done. I mean, the body of the application, and they just focus on the personal statement. And ideally, you should send your application before November 15th, ideally, but most people wait until December 1. I waited until nearly December 1, so it's fine, right? And you find that they spend their time writing and revising the personal statement. And by November 15th or 16th, they have what they think is a good draft of the personal statement. And then they start rushing through the rest of the application, thinking that it's just about filling in information. And then they come upon this part and then they rush, right? And that's bad. That's terribly bad, right? That's terribly bad. As I said, Harvard is interested in you as a human being. Harvard wants to see that you are determined to make something out of your life, right? It's not necessary. Grades are important, but they have their weighting and that's it. That's where it ends, right? Exceptionally good grades would not make them increase your weighting for grades. It won't happen. They would look at other factors, right? And I feel that the personal statement is one very important aspect. I feel that this is also a very important aspect. Now, you would find that someone might write a personal statement and pick an issue. And remember that personal statement says, pick an issue in your area of interest, right? They want to see something from your general field of interest. Now, someone would pick an issue in, say, energy, right? Energy law, and write a very beautiful piece on energy law, and then come to the academic interests and rank energy law as academic interest 3. Then the question is, why did you write it? For me, the next question would be, so why did you spend time writing a statement on energy law when you have only a passing interest in it, right? Now, it's possible that you could state your academic interest in such a way that they are so interconnected that effectively it doesn't matter how you rank them. They are essentially the same thing. That's what I did. So for mine, I said, okay, you guys think you're being smart. All right, I'll show you that it's fine. So I chose finance, I chose securities law, I chose company law. I think there was mergers and acquisitions somewhere there, but I chose things that were so interrelated that it was impossible to divorce them, right? And then, so essentially what I was telling you in my academic interest was that, hey, I am interested in finance. You would see finance everywhere there, even if it is not written there, right? So that's what I did. I looked at it very well and I chose areas that were so interrelated that they could be practiced together, they could be studied together, not in first line you say your academic interest is in technology law, and then the second line you say your academic interest is in constitutional law. You have to find a way to relate constitutional law and technology law or you're talking nonsense, right? So you have to have interests that work well together. You can't have interests that are almost, well, nothing in law is mutually exclusive, but you can't have interests that it will make no sense to practice together, for instance. You can't claim to be doing, say, American tort law, right? And be also interested in public remedies in continental Europe. It won't work, right? So you have to have interests that are consistent and that flow together and that can be practiced or learned together. And then when you have those interests, you rank them out. And then you talk about why you're related to those interests and release them to your career goals. Now, remember that you are not talking about your career. You have not spoken about your career goals, essentially. Your career goals come after this section, right? So they are already asking you to, in this statement, in this 1,500 words, right? Give us a sense of where you think your career is going to. Connect your interests to those career goals and tell us how these areas of interest will help build your career, right? So you're doing a lot of things there. You're telling them why these areas interest you, how these areas fit into what you're doing now, and how they fit into your long-term career, your long-term career goals. Do you get my point? And then when you now go down to the part on career plans, it's easy to say my career plan is to become a professor of law. I really haven't given you any information. I've only told that my career plan is to become a professor of law. So Harvard wants to see that you have a sensible plan to becoming a professor of law. So if you want to become a professor of law in 10 years, what are you doing in the first 3 years? What are you doing in the next 3 years after that? And what are you doing after that, which is technically long-term? So you don't want to say, what are your career goals? Because when you ask a blanket statement, like, what are your career goals? I'll just tell you something that I probably want to do when I'm 50, when I'm 60. And I mean, anyone can do that, but it takes genius to plan. It takes genius to know the specific steps you need to take to get to a particular point, right? So if you're going to tell them that by year 7 and beyond, you hope to be doing X and Y, then the steps you take in 1 to 3 and 4 to 6 should be necessary first steps to what you want to do in year 7 and beyond, right? So you can't tell them, for instance, that you want to practice law, that you want to practice law exclusively for the first 6 years, And after that 6 years, you now want to just jump into academia directly. The question would be, okay, that's fine, but when do you intend to do the kind of research that would launch you into academia, right? It makes no sense. You can't say that you want to jump into public interest litigation for the first 6 years and defense of human rights and death sentence cases, and then tell them in year 7 and beyond, you now hope to transition to New York and join a full-time corporate financial services law firm in New York. It makes no sense. Do you get my point? So you have to make sure that year 1 to 3 fits into years 4 to 6, or supports year 4 to 6, and then 4 to 6 supports 7 and beyond. And then when you finish doing that, you now go down and write yet another essay, right? Telling them where you want to carry out these plans, where you want to do all of this. And so they don't want to just give them a blanket statement. And I hope our friends at Cambridge don't hear this. You know, at Cambridge, just give you what are your career goals, right? And then you write, and then you just confuse them by telling them things you hope to achieve when you're 60, right? But Harvard is not looking at that kind of. Harvard wants to see that you know where you want to get to, you know how to get there, or at least you have a sensible plan for getting there. And it does not stop there. It doesn't stop at just listing these things out. You go on to explain to them, this is the goal. This is where I want to achieve these goals. This is how I intend to achieve these goals. All of that must be stated in the second box. So it's something you need to think very carefully about. It's something you need to think very, very carefully about. And do not make the mistake of not relating your goals to your interests. Remember that your interests, you related it to your goals, because those interests are the things that will fuel your desire to get to the point you want to get to. So when you're chasing those goals, also try to relate them to your interests. And it's 1,500 characters, so you need to be very careful. The word limit runs out really quickly. So write it, revise it over and over again to make sure that it's punchy enough serious, because I feel it's a landmine, right? There are several questions asked at the same time. The questions are related and distinct at the same time. So this is one part of the application I'd advise that you take as important as you take your personal statement. And people also make the mistake of almost reciting what's in their CV. Don't do that, right? So make sure that you take out time to fill out this part very well and very carefully. Think about it very carefully. Not think about those fancy things that you would like to do. Don't think about those fancy things that everyone would like to do. I mean, everyone would want to become CEO of Amazon, but not everyone will become CEO of Amazon, right? So if I can have becoming CEO of Amazon as my career goal, it's a goal. I may or may not achieve it, but I can have it as a goal, right? But that's not what Harvard is looking for. Harvard is looking for someone who has carefully thought about what they want their life to look like and builds interests around those things, or builds them, started acquiring knowledge and experience around the interests that will lead them to that point, and have a clear, sensible plan, right? A plan is not concrete. A plan is not cast in stone. It can be changed when the need arises, but at least have a clear, sensible plan. And that's what Harvard wants to see from these two parts.
Great. But Kenneth, then there is another question which says that in which country would you like to pursue these goals? And this is another fairly elaborate question, and it expects you to at least answer that question.
I refer to that. They want to see the country you would want to. But if you look carefully at Harvard's FAQs, they said they are very interested in people who want to take the knowledge back home. So if I haven't mentioned that earlier, go and read the FAQs. They provide some useful tips on how to get around the application, because Harvard knows that a lot of people apply to the US because of the OPT, right? OPT is the optional practical training, and you get that as part of your student visa to work in the US for 1 year after your master's program. So lots of people, I've spoken to lots of people who say, I prefer applying to the US because I have the OPT option as opposed to the UK. And I said, that's fine. Just know that if they get the sense that you're more interested in staying in the US than in studying at Harvard for the goals of advancing your career goals, you definitely will not be getting admitted, right? So here they've said in which country or countries. Obviously, Harvard wants its people, its alum, to be people of international repute, right? It pays Harvard if they're saying, this guy, this lady, Harvard alum, Harvard whatever year, is Director General of the WTO, for instance, or is some top shot at the World Bank or the IMF, or some top shot at the UNDP or some other international organization somewhere. Harvard wants that because it sells them, it sells their brand, right? It shows that our people are doing well. They will talk about you, they'll post you up on Harvard Law Today, they'll see nice things about you and say, we remember when this person was here, even if they don't remember Jack, but they'll say, we remember when this person was here. They want that. They want their students or their alums to be international, people of international repute. But they also want you to help your country, right? And it will be nicer if your international repute, if your international reputation is founded on work you've done for your home country. It may be in your home country or out of your home country, but at least it's related to your home country. That shows that you're giving back, right? That shows that you're giving back. And so that's why in the FAQs, in some obscure corner of the FAQs, they've said that ideally we would like you to go back and use the knowledge you've gained. And I remember saying somewhere in my application that when I'm done, I plan to go back. And I actually did go back, right? So they want to see that. So when they say in which country or countries, you want to be very careful about answering that question. You want to be very, very careful about answering that question. Remember that the FAQs tell you what they expect to see as your answer. Don't tell them, I hope to use my OPT and get a place in a law firm in New York. That's bad. Because
fair enough.
If you write that, then you need to tinker with your goals, your career goals, and how you plan to achieve that. So be very smart about this. This form, like as I said, this is one part of the application you want to think very, very carefully about. You need to think very carefully about this part of the application.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kenneth. Now, another rather a non-conventional question which Harvard asks is, tell us something fun or interesting about yourself. Now, how do you approach that question?
Well, Pranjal, you know me. I don't think I have that many fun things going for me. But it relates to a point I made earlier. I said Harvard is interested in you as a human being. So it's not about your academic. They don't want someone who would come and just sit down and not have a conversation with classmates, for instance. I know that when I see these things, I know I'm terribly bad at socializing, right? But I really try my best, right? So Harvard is interested in you as a human being, and it goes beyond your academics. It goes beyond what grades have to say. It goes beyond what your employment has to say, right? And that question is just, it's testing your subjective assessment of yourself, right? So if you don't think you're a very nice person, there's no reason why someone should think you're a nice person, right? So they're asking for your own subjective assessment of yourself. Tell them something that they would not otherwise know from the rest of your application, something that is unique. And for me, I feel I have something like that. First of all, I'm Nigerian. I'm Black. And it's very difficult for Caucasians to, well, I don't know. they find it weird. At least some people, the people I've met, have found it weird that I love classical music and I listen to classical music all the time. They find it weird that you are Black and you find Bach and Beethoven and Pachelbel as being the best, purest forms of music available. And so that has always worked for me. I've always written it there, all my applications, even the PhD, I wrote it there. So it
Lovely,
works.
lovely, lovely.
Right? So that's unique. It's me. It will be difficult to find someone else who would share, right? That's one. Second weird thing is my love for Shakespeare. And so when I say, oh, I love Shakespeare, I've been accused of badolatry, and that's one of the best things for me in the UK was visiting Shakespeare's gravesite. It's weird, right? But well, that's me, right? I won't jump to the next available party. I won't go on a trip with friends. I'd rather go on a trip by myself. And if I'm going on a trip, I'm not going to go and experience the hustle and bustle, the nightlife in Scotland. I'm going on a trip to visit the Stonehenge or visit the Highclere Castle, and stuff like those are the things that interest me, right? And there are things that if you contrast them with my Black skin, my very Black skin, right? My Nigerian roots, oh, are you sure you're Nigerian? Yes, I am Nigerian and I had public education and all of that. So don't worry. These are things that I picked up as I grew up. So it works for me, right? And they are unique. I have a friend, she was applying to a PhD, I think in Lancaster. And there was a similar question, tell us something about yourself and all of that. And she said she's hardworking, she's dedicated, she's this, she's that. I was like, what the hell is this? Take this off. Now, think about something that's you. I know you. We went to the same university and I remember she likes to sing. I said, I didn't want to tell them you sing. I just wanted to get her own sense of herself, whether you really know yourself. What's your hardworking, your dedicated, excuse me. If you had a certain grade in school, anybody who says that would know that you are hardworking to an extent. If your recommendations say this person works hard. I mean, there are several places through the application where someone can get the sense that you work hard. In fact, I believe that if you have the courage to apply to Harvard, then you must have met certain minimum requirements mentally, right? So it's clear that you work hard. Why the hell are you stating it in your application that you work hard? Don't say that anywhere, in my opinion, just don't, right? So I said, look, just wipe out all of that. I work hard, I'm dedicated, I'm disciplined, and just things along those lines. Hell no, don't say those. Say stuff like, I remember in my PhD application, in addition to, I wish I could pull it up now to read it out. In addition to classical music, and obviously, I related it to some of the new things I found in Cambridge, right? You know, Cambridge is a bicycle town. You cycle almost everywhere. So I said, I found a new hobby, cycling and listening to my classical music. So I just cycle as opposed to staying at home and listening to my classical music. So these days, my new hobby was cycling and listening to classical music. So I put in my cardio while I also get my classical music. So I walk out and get my classical music. And I say, yeah, that it works for me, right? And the town has a beautiful site. So I said, whenever I'm tired of, I mean, the PhD is jail term. You're banishing yourself to the library for 3 years. So whenever I need to escape from the books, I just get on my bicycle and I listen to my classical music, right? That's what I said. Those are the kinds of things I'd expect to see in that additional information piece. And thinking very carefully about my first, technically second day at Harvard, and was a Tuesday, I think August 15th, 2017. When we had our welcome program, Professor Bill Alford was just talking about some of the most interesting things he saw in the application. I spoke about the guy who was a ventriloquist, the guy who is a Marine, US Navy SEAL. Spoke about someone who said she's weird and that she believes that Harvard is the place for weird people. Someone just very random, very funny stuff, right? Someone who said, well, that they've always been interested in fashion and they saw that Harvard has one course in fashion law. So what the hell, they're coming to do it, right? So then the only reason why that person came to Harvard was for one course, fashion law, right? Just very random, very funny stuff. But you get the sense that all of those things were said in that additional information column. That's not the kind of information you put in your personal statement. That's not the kind of information you put elsewhere in your application. It's the kind of information that goes into that additional information space, right? And those were the things that Professor Alford was talking about and he was happy about. And he was saying, I'd like to meet you. I'd like to know how you do this and all of that. And I said, nice. And I remember I was approached by, it was 𝐁𝐿. I said, oh, there's a classical music society. We listen to classical music. And I said, nice. So 𝐁𝐿, I think, is the deputy head of the graduate program or the international program. So her voice or whatever she says about admissions rank highly. So if you said, oh, who's this guy who likes classical music? That's me, and I'm in. You get my point. So don't go on talking about how hardworking or how dedicated or how disciplined you are. Nah, leave a little. Talk about those fun things that make you, that make you a human being, not a robot. And just be honest about it. Just introspect. Think about you, those things that interest you outside books, and talk about those.
Lovely. That was very insightful, rather very interesting. So thank you so much for that answer, Kenneth.